Have you ever sat in that heavy silence at a family dinner? Here on The Story Within, we retell those moments, honest, everyday, sometimes controversial. Every story is a mirror. Subscribe, join the conversation, and maybe find a little healing. I live a block off the Savannah River in a narrow wood frame house. My mother left me a place that smells like lemon oil and old pine when the windows are open. In the mornings, a damp breeze pushes through the screen door and lifts the curtains like a slow breath. I keep the kitchen neat, cast iron skillet, seasoned black-white bowls, stacked in threes, a coffee mug that says Federal Courts in faded blue. At 62 habits are anchors. I set the burner low, stirred the pot of grits until it gave off small, contented sighs, then killed the flame and set a bowl to cool on the counter. Nathan walked in without looking up from his phone, the shoes the navy suit, the clipped strides that make the floorboards announce him. He didn't say good morning. He touched the rim of the bowl with the tip of his finger the way a sommelier tests the side of a glass. Cold, he said. Cold grits make a cold house. He slid the bowl aside so the spoon clinked and looked at me like I'd done something personal to him. Try again? I reached for the pot. He watched. I could feel his eyes as if they were hands on my shoulders. I stirred and plated and sprinkled a pinch of cheddar. When I set the fresh bowl down, his phone lit his face a cool aquarium blue. No sugar, he said without glancing up. You know that. He took one bite, scooped another, then stopped, and the stillness put a wire in my chest. Texture, he murmured an indictment, not a word. His hand clipped the bowl as he stood. Porcelain hit the sink, cracked into petals, a shard skittering under the stove. We don't do sloppy in my house. He moved past me, but the brush of his arm pinned my elbow to the counter just long enough to leave a crescent of pressure. It wasn't the worst he's done. It was the kind that announces a border and dares you to cross it. He rinsed his hands as if he'd touched something that could stain. Meeting at 8. Coffee black. Toast 2 minutes, not 3. Then he was gone down the hallway, door shut, voice returning to a whisper with the phone. I rinsed the counter twice, then took the small mirror from the drawer and turned my face to the light. A new bloom of red marked the inside of my arm where the counter's edge had taken me. On the windowsill sat a tube of concealer Sloan had left the week before, a little pink flag of a post-it stuck to it for the discoloration. Hope you're okay. Sloan speaks soft when he's in the room and softer when he isn't. I dabbed the cream on the mark until it matched the rest of me. It didn't look like me, but it matched. When I first brought Nathan back into this house, the heat still clung to the bricks at midnight, and the cicadas worked themselves ragged in the oaks. 3 years now, though, it feels like 10. He stood on the porch with a suitcase and the last polite part of his voice. Just until I get steady, he said, eyes shiny the way a boy's eyes used to be when he'd scraped a knee and didn't want to fuss. He had that slipped halo look men get when the story they were telling about themselves gapes open and the wind whistles through. I made coffee, wheeled his bag down the hall, and told him he could take the front bedroom with the light. Those first weeks were almost like family grocery runs, where he lifted the heavy water cases, dinners that sat hot on the table instead of cooling on the stove. He'd ask about my years at the courthouse, and I'd tell the parts that are safe to tell the rhythms of filing orders, the dignified silence in a courtroom when truth has the floor. He'd nod and say, "You held the place together, Mom." I kept that sentence in my apron pocket and touched it sometimes when I washed the evening dishes. But people build new houses inside your house while you're humming. It started with little remarks. You should iron. Wrinkles read negligent. Or, that pantry's a mess. Mom makes your mind look messy. The suggestions came like rain finds cracks seeking widening. Then the money. It was casual like kindness. You shouldn't be carrying cash at your age. Just give me your routing number. I'll set your pension to go straight to bills. I said yes because yes is what you say to your child in need. I said yes because the word no, once jabbed back into the throat enough times, learns to stay there. The next month, he handed me a 20 and told me to text him receipts. Keeps us both organized, he said. The month after that, it was a 20 and a 10. Now most weeks it's 25 in an envelope, like an allowance, like a favor. The deed came later. We went to the UPS store off Victory to get the papers notarized. The clerk wore a smile that didn't belong to his eyes. It's just to avoid probate mess, Nathan said, tapping where I needed to sign the pen, placed exactly at the line. If something happens, I need to be able to move on things. We both nodded as if death were a logistical chore and not a life. When we got home, he set the folder in the secretary desk and said, "This is safer." After that, every discussion about the house was a simple sentence. My name's on it too. The house knows him now. It carries his footfalls like a rumor. It anticipates the swing of the front door and the sigh of the hall light. He controls the thermostat. 72 is for hotels, the grocery list. No white bread. It reads childish, the TV volume. Silence is a virtue. My mother's framed photograph over the mantel is the only thing that still faces where I placed it. Everything else aligns to his angles. Some nights I walk the rooms with my palm on the wainscoting like I'm learning it blind, tracing the grain in the pine until my fingers know it better than my eyes. By 5 I'm up, whether I want to be or not. My body has learned his schedule the way you learn a bad road by its potholes. Coffee grounds in water line exact. Toast set down when the bathroom fan clicks off. Eggs on the plate when the bedroom door opens. I place a glass of water on the coaster to the left of his place, because to the right means a comment about drips near the outlets. He likes the paper folded to business. He likes the salt turned inward so it doesn't advertise itself to guests who might think we overuse it. He has rules for things I didn't know could have rules. Sloane comes through some mornings with perfume like iced mint and a smile that belongs in photographs. She air kisses his cheek, makes a soft sound, and calls me Ms. Moore, as if I'm a neighbor and not the reason the lights turn on. "You're an angel," she says if he's listening. If he isn't, she leaves small offerings, the concealer, a lavender candle, sometimes a bag of tea that promises calm. She sets them down like apology notes from a room that can't speak. After breakfast, Nathan leaves in a trail of cologne and aftershave and expensive gum. The house exhales. I collect the plates and stand at the sink long enough for the water to run hot. Out the window, the oaks dress the street in green shade, even in August. A freight horn floats from the river, and the sound settles into the plates as I rinse. The mark on my arm has gone from red to plum. I roll my sleeve down, not to hide it from a person, just to put it away for a minute. My phone buzzes on the counter. "Sloane, we're hosting the HOA fundraising brunch here next Sunday. It'll be nice. Let's keep things smooth. Don't embarrass Nathan." I typed back, "Of course," and set the phone face down. The grits on the stove had tightened into a pale, obedient shape. I loosened them with a splash of milk, set 2 bowls to cool, and opened the windows to let the river air through. Sloane's text sat on the counter all week like a note pinned to a corkboard you couldn't miss even with your eyes closed. I found myself moving around it, shopping lists, towels folded into tight thirds, the good crystal lifted from the cabinet and rinsed even though it hadn't seen dust. She sent a second message with a bullet list. Extra ice, 2 cases of sparkling water, a citrus-forward white small bites that read generous and flowers that photograph well. I wrote it all down in my own hand because that makes things real. The market on Abercorn still sells peaches that smell like July even in September. I chose 6 for the centerpiece and a bundle of magnolia leaves that showed a good face to the camera. Nathan walked through the preparations as if he'd commissioned a set. "Push the sofa back," he said. "People need lanes." He wanted the side table at a 45. He turned the labels of the bottles toward the room. Sometimes it felt like he was arranging a photograph, and all I had to do was not blink. On Saturday night, I ironed the linen runner and laid out the plates, white simple, no gold rim to catch light. My knuckles were tight by habit, but the house had a good hush to it, that coastal quiet, before a storm damp air distant trains the river moving where you can't see it. I polished the silver tongs with a dishcloth until my face blurred in them. When I caught my arm in the lamp's reflection, there was a yellowing crescent where red had been. I rolled my sleeve down and pressed the seam flat with my palm until it obeyed. Sunday came with a rinse of cool and the smell of cut grass from somewhere up the block. I set out bowls for pimento cheese and shrimp salad. I halved eggs and piped the yolks with paprika like my mother taught me, pressing each into a ring of lettuce so they wouldn't slide. I whisked a vinaigrette with mustard and a touch of honey because Sloane calls sweetness a bridge, and I have learned that bridges make it easier for people to cross you without noticing. By 9:30, Sloane arrived in a pale dress that knew its way around a camera. She kissed the air near my cheek and pressed her bag into my hands, while her own settled on the backs of chairs on arrangements I'd already thought done. "This is so lovely, Ms. Moore," she said, giving the words a shape Nathan could hear from the hallway. "Can we put the charcuterie near the window?" Natural light sells the story. She added sprigs of rosemary to the peaches. She moved the bowl of olives 2 inches to the left. The house bent around her the way gentle trees bend around a fence that's been there long enough. Nathan came down in a sport coat that made him look like a donation. "Good," he said, taking in the spread the way an appraiser takes in a piece. "Remember short answers. If anyone asks about the house, you say it's ours." He straightened a stack of napkins until their edges chimed. The bell rang at 10 on the dot, a tidy sound that matched the shoes on the other side. The HOA board came first, a man with perfect hair and the word Rotary sitting behind his eyes, 2 women who knew the price of every yard sod and had opinions about colors on porches. Their laughter stuck to the molding. "What a gem," one said, sweeping a hand at the wainscoting. "Older homes need constant attention," the other added like a compliment with a bill inside. More guests followed, neighbors with polished dogs, a realtor who treated the magnolia like a co-star, a couple who arrived in tennis whites, carrying a donation check already signed. The kitchen turned into a small theater where I kept time and heat rotating platters to the front when their edges looked too worked, saying please and thank you, until the words lost their center and just became sound. Sloane floated, introducing, connecting. Collecting praise. This is Nathan's mother, Evelyn, she said, as if I were a feature of the house that deserved pointing out. She's the reason we can pull off anything. The way she tilted her head made it feel like a ribbon being tied, presentable, decorative. When she needed more ice, she made a small motion with her glass. When she needed another tray, her fingers found the inside of my elbow and pressed lightly as if to remind me that elbows can be useful. They set a glass in my hand once, and I put it on the sill untouched. If I drank, I might stand still. If I stood still, I might see too much. I felt Dana before I saw her. Some presences announced themselves by absence, the missing weight where a conversation should have been for years. She stepped in behind a pair of donors with a canvas tote and a legal pad tucked under her arm. Her hair was pulled back the way it's always been when she means to get something done. She paused on the threshold like a person who has done a thing they promised themselves not to do and found it bearable after all. Welcome, welcome, Sloane sang. Everyone, this is Dana Quinn, Counsel for Greenways. She keeps us honest about the trees. There was a chuckle for that and some talk about saplings and benches. Dana's eyes find things before the rest of her arrives. They found me across the room. She smoothed it over with a smile the room could read as pleasant, then let the edges loosen when she reached the kitchen doorway. Ev, she said. Not Evelyn, not Ms. Moore, that small syllable with childhood in it. Dana. My voice came out fine. I held a tray like a shield, and she eased it from me as if her hands had been built for unsticking burdens. They still let you run the show, she said, looking over the spread like a prosecutor cataloging exhibits, the soft kind that sees the person under the file. You always kept the file straight. You were the steady one. There are sentences you put away for later and sentences you cannot keep from using immediately because they prop you up from the inside. I nodded, then turned to the sink and rinsed a spoon that didn't need rinsing. Nathan slid in beside Sloane and kissed the air near Dana's cheek. Didn't know you'd be handling this. Small town, he said, giving the last word a shine he saves for meetings. He took the tray from Dana's hand with a smile that reset every angle of the room. Mom, the olives are running low. I'll refill, I said, glad for a task that had a clear end. People talked budgets. People talked about a vandalized mailbox 3 streets over with a seriousness they could have spent on bigger things if they knew how. They praised Sloane's event sense and Nathan's vision for the neighborhood as if it belonged to him. You're lucky, someone told me in front of the refrigerator, her fingertips grazing my forearm as if to steady me. Not everyone gets a son so involved. I looked down where her nail had landed. The concealer had done its work. The skin read as neutral, which is a word people use when they want something to disappear. Dana found me again when the crowd pivoted to the living room to hear a few remarks about fundraising targets. We stood by the window where the light is kind and makes everybody younger by a fraction. She touched my elbow, then took her hand back as if she'd reached into a drawer and touched something sharp. How are you, really? She asked. The word really is built like a bridge, too. It can carry or it can collapse depending on the foot that steps on it. I'm moving through the day, I said, which is what days ask. She looked at my face the way people look at a map when they think they know the route and don't want to be wrong. If you ever need, she began and let the sentence fray so it wouldn't catch on anything in public. Sloane's voice lifted from the other room, bright as confetti. Nathan followed with a few lines about community, the kind you can slide off one event and onto the next like a ribbon. I collected empty glasses and tried to keep up with how fast need accumulates when you invite people in. At noon, the house had a sheen of success. The donation basket breathed heavy. The olives were gone. The deviled eggs reduced to paprika fingerprints on a plate. The magnolia held the peaches up like a queen carries an orb. A woman with a gold bracelet squeezed my hand and said, "This is the kind of home that makes a neighborhood." I smiled as if I had made both and had the energy to make more. Dana stood in the doorway, ready to go tote strap across her chest, like she might need her hands free. "I'll call you," she said. We both knew how phones work. The promise sat there between us, new enough to be fragile. After the last cluster of praise drifted out onto the porch and down the walk, Sloane exhaled hard enough to blur the glass of the storm door. "We did it," she told Nathan, "and you were wonderful." She hugged me the way people hug furniture they don't own. "You're the heart," she said. "I couldn't do any of this without you." When she said you, she meant me, and when she said this, she meant all of it, and when she said couldn't, she meant shouldn't have to. She left rosewater on my shoulder that made the air taste expensive. Nathan did a final lap, flipping switches to the settings. He prefers resetting the thermostat to normal, which is a number only he knows. "Good job," he said to the room, or to me, then looked at the donation basket and nodded at the math of it. He picked up his jacket like the end of a scene and said he had calls. The door closed behind him with a certainty doors admire. I watched the street settle back into itself, a boy on a bike, a dog at the end of a leash, the oak shadows making lace on the pavement. The house let out the day in small sighs. I carried plates to the sink and let the water run until it warmed, then hotter. The sound and the heat give hands something to do so the rest of you doesn't have to feel everything at once. The phone rang on the counter, a number I didn't recognize, the zeros and fours arranged in a way that made me think of offices. Nathan doesn't like me answering unknown calls. He says scams are a tax on the gullible, and I've paid enough tax. I let it ring twice, then a third time. The water kept running. I dried my hands on the dish towel with the lemon pattern and picked up. "Hello," I said. "Mrs. Moore." The line carried office air, dry, overcooled crisp. "Peter Langford, Seafront Capital. I'm sorry to intrude on a Sunday." My name in a stranger's mouth made something under my ribs lift its head. "Yes," I said. "We've flagged activity tied to an account in your name." He didn't rush the way people don't when they want you to hear every word. Company funds have moved through it for several months. It's better we speak in person. If you're able, I can meet you today. 2:00. I looked at the sink, the lemon dish towel, the peaches on the table, pretending nothing in the world was urgent. "I can be there," I said. Seafront's office sat in one of those glass buildings on Bay that make the sky look like a spreadsheet. The elevator hummed its way up and opened into quiet carpet. Peter met me at the door in shirt sleeves tie loosened, as if he'd argued with it and won politely. His office held framed charts I didn't try to read, in a plant so green it must have had someone who spoke to it. "We appreciate you coming," he said, sliding a folder across the desk. Inside were bank printouts and arrows in red pen that made a road I didn't remember traveling. Over roughly 6 months, he tapped dates with the clean nail of an accountant. Company disbursements routed into this account, then withdrawn in cash. 72,000 give or take. Your name is on the receiving end. I stared at my own name as if it belonged to some other woman who hadn't minded her kitchen that morning. "I don't handle those accounts," I said. The words felt small against the paper. "My pension goes to Bill's. My son set it up to be efficient." Peter sat back. He had the kind of face that doesn't do theater. "Mrs. Moore, it looks like your profile is being used as a pass-through." "That's not a judgment about you. It's how people do this when they want to color the money right up until it's gone." Heat pressed at my eyes, though the room ran cold. "I didn't authorize anything I said." "I believe you," he said, and I was surprised how much it mattered to hear the sentence land. "But unless you state that formally, the paper says otherwise. We'll need you to sign an affidavit noting your lack of consent and your son's control over your banking. We'll also need to protect you." He paused. "Are you safe at home?" People ask that as if a house can be a single answer. "I'm fine to leave here," I said. He nodded and slid a form forward. "Read initial sign. We'll make copies for you. And," he turned a page, "if he learns you've been here, he may escalate. Think through who you trust." I signed my name slow, Evelyn Moore, in practiced loops. The copier made that dry wing sound in the corner and returned my life to me in 2 sets of staples. Outside, the air wrapped me hot and familiar. The river smell undercut the clone of the building. I carried the folder like it weighed more than paper, and maybe it did. Nathan was home when I got back, or the house was doing an impression of his presence. The shoes aligned with military care by the mat, the jacket over the chair, as if it had decided the chair needed dressing. He sat at the kitchen table without the paper, which meant his attention had a single place to land. "Where were you?" he asked. "No rise, no fall, just the line you step over so he can decide how to react." "At your office," I said. The truth is the simplest sentence and sometimes the most dangerous. Peter Langford called. For a second, nothing moved but the pulse at his throat. He set his phone down screen first and stood. The room got smaller around his shoulders. "You shouldn't have done that, Mom." I didn't step back. The chair at my calves kept me standing. He showed me papers with my name, money in and out. His smile came slow, the way a cat's does when it has patience to spare. "You don't remember all the authorizations you've signed. You don't remember lots of things. That's not your fault." He reached as if to tuck my sleeve and used the gesture to take my wrist and set it on the back of the chair, a placing more than a grip, the kind that leaves fingerprints only on the inside. "If you keep inventing stories, we'll do what families do when someone can't manage their affairs." His voice dropped. "Guardianship is a form. One form. Then you won't have to worry about signing anything ever again." The word landed heavy in the space between the photographs on the wall and the calendar that reads like a hymn trash day pharmacy church. I pulled my wrist free and my skin remembered his hand after my eyes looked away. He leaned in close enough that I could count the white in his eyes. "You are confused. That's all anybody needs to hear." He was finished then, or wanted me to think he was. He collected his jacket with 2 fingers like it was the only part of the scene that mattered and left. The door shut with exactly the amount of force required to say control without saying anger. I stood until the house remembered I was in it. I poured water and drank half of it and couldn't tell you if it was cold. When my hand stopped shaking, I set the folder from Seafront in the secretary desk, where my mother kept the birth certificates, and the letters with stamps so old the glue has opinions. Night showed up all at once the way it does near water 1 minute, gold on the leaves the next, a bruise. I switched the porch light off out of habit. The street fell into the oaks, and the oaks leaned over it like old men the town still listens to. Somewhere 2 blocks down, a screen door snapped, and a voice said a dog's name like a plea. I went to the kitchen for a glass for something to hold. That's when I saw the motion in the azalea bed, a figure bent where you bend to weed or to wire. A metallic glint lifted and set, deliberate. I knew the shape of the woman, even in silhouette the neat bun, the shoulders that had lifted more than their share of groceries and grief. June Whittaker didn't skulk. Even crouched, she had purpose. She looked up as if she felt my eyes. Her finger went to her lips, and then she tapped 2 knuckles twice on the frame of my window as if knocking on bone. I nodded and drew the curtain an inch. She finished, stood, brushed soil from her knees, and vanished into her own yard like a sensible idea returning to its origin. She knocked the next afternoon at the back door, not the front, because the back door is where people come when they know you. I was in the roses, she said, stepping inside, but the azalea has the angle. She set a small black device on the table about the size of a matchbox, with a lens no bigger than a shirt button. Doorbell camera without the doorbell. Motion wakes it up. Sounds decent if the wind behaves. You were recording, and the word came out larger than I intended. I recorded what needed recording, she said, and her voice had that nurse steel in it, the tone that tells you stitches aren't optional. Sit. We sat. June scrolled with a thumb that managed illnesses and home repairs and grandsons who don't understand sunscreen. She pressed play. The first sounds were summer cicadas, somebody's radio 2 yards over a mower far away. Then Nathan's voice at my window yesterday, lower than he uses for company, as intimate and sharp as a knife. You keep making up stories and I'll file. Guardianship Evelyn, 1 form. A judge signs and you don't sign anything again. Do you understand? There was the small catch of my breath that only I would notice. Another sentence softer and worse. And if you talk to anyone at my office again, I'll move you where they take care of people who forget things. You'll thank me later. June paused it. She watched my face like a person watches a stovetop when they're waiting for the first bubble. That's the second time I've heard his voice like that this month, she said. First time I told myself I misheard. I don't mishear. I've been your neighbor 20 years. I've watched you carry yourself upright when the day had other ideas. Now I've watched you carry bruises under sleeves in August. We're not pretending. I nodded because the machine had taken the air out of other responses. My hands were folded and my right thumb tried to find a seam in the left, like it meant to pry me open. June reached into her bag and set a second object on the table, a little recorder with a red button and edges worn smooth by use. This can't walk into court by itself, but it can keep the facts safe until a person with a badge sees them. And I have a name for you. She produced a card. White clean font. Carla Reyes, Assistant District Attorney, Special Victims and Elder Protection. I patched up half that office over the years, June said. Carla's the one who calls the right people without turning it into a parade. She didn't ask permission before she dialed. She didn't put it on speaker until she told the voice on the other end who she was with. Carla, it's June Whittaker. I'm sitting with Evelyn Moore. Yes, the house with the blue shutters. We have audio of a guardianship threat and documentation from the son's employer about money moving through her account. The phone made the quiet you hear right before a plan meets a clock. Ms. Moore. Carla said, her voice warm without being patted. I'm sorry, are you safe this minute? I am, I said. The recorder looked smaller than it had a second ago. I'd like to preserve that audio and take your statement, Carla said. If you're able, bring the device and any papers to my office this afternoon. If that's too much, I'll send an investigator to you. A beat. You decide. We'll follow your lead. The sentence landed like a chair under a tired person. June watched me, not hurrying. I can come, I said. Carla gave an address on Montgomery and a name at the front desk. June jotted both in her square handwriting the kind clerks like because it saves time. We'll see you shortly, Carla said. The line went quiet. The kitchen returned the hum of the old fridge when it remembers it's needed, the flap of the curtain when the river throws its breath this way, the clock that ticks, because that is its job. June slid the card toward me and set the small recorder in my open palm. The plastic warmed quickly against my skin. Put this in your bag, she said, and take the folder and your ID. The rest we'll sort when we're standing where we should be. I nodded. I opened the secretary desk and lifted the seafront copies. The staples caught the light like small Sirius stars. I put on my sweater even though the day didn't ask for it and slipped my purse strap across my shoulder. The house watched me from its frames and its wood and its windows that know too much. I locked the back door, then unlocked it and checked it again, then locked it once more the way people do when they need emotion to occupy their hands. June waited on the stoop, steady as a porch post. We stepped into the afternoon. The oaks kept their counsel. The heat met us like a fact. I pulled the door to and let the latch find itself. Carla's office on Montgomery smelled faintly of coffee and copy toner, the scent of paperwork turning into action. She shook my hand like a person who understands bones. June sat beside me with her purse between her shoes, as if steadiness could be placed on the floor and guarded. An investigator named Moore, no relation, clicked a pen and laid out a small arrangement on the table: evidence bag, chain of custody form, consent to record. We'll image the device, Carla said, setting June's camera and recorder on a static-free mat. You can watch the transfer if you like. The screen filled with a progress bar that moved in determinate inches, the kind that reassure people who like to see the end coming. She photographed the bruise on my arm, the angle of the kitchen window, the azalea bed where the lens had peered in. She slid a legal pad across. Tell me everything from the beginning that matters to you. I spoke. June filled gaps the way a good nurse fills the space under a shoulder so the body can rest without pinching. The air conditioner breathed. The clock on the wall did its job without ceremony. When I reached the part about Seafront's money, the numbers, the arrows, my name sitting where it didn't belong. Carla's pen slowed, then kept going. Here's what we can do today, she said when I stopped. We'll take your affidavit disavowing the transactions. We'll log the audio threats. If he attempts to move you to a bank for any reason, call me. I will place officers nearby. You don't have to change your routine. You don't need to tip your hand. She looked at me to be sure I was inside the moment with her. For now, go home with someone you trust. See. June squeezed my hand, the kind of pressure that says ready. We signed, initialed, dated. The investigator sealed the devices in labeled plastic like fruit put up for winter. Carla walked us to the elevator and said, "Answer your phone if you can. If not, let it ring and we'll try again." I slept at June's that night on a sofa that had forgiven the weight of widows before me. The room carried her lemon furniture polish and something green from the backyard. I lay with my hands folded on my ribs and watched the square of streetlight wander across the ceiling. The house next door, that is my house, sat in the dark with the porch light off. The oaks held out their arms as if weather could be reasoned with. At 8:42 the next morning, Nathan stepped into my kitchen like a cue delivered on time. I was already there, coffee poured sleeves down. He wore a black suit that made his face look polished and his eyes cold. "We have to clean up a clerical mess at the bank," he said, sliding his keys into his pocket with a click that meant conclusions. "Bring your purse, smile. People are watching." I texted June one word from the hallway bank. She sent a thumbs up I could hear in my head as a practical noise rather than a symbol. He drove to Broughton Parallel, parked in a gap. He said I wouldn't have judged possible and led us through the revolving door into air so conditioned it felt like expensive weather. I kept my hand on my purse and my back straight. The lobby had that soft voiced carpet, good banks by sound, swallowing sound. He placed a form in front of me at a table you're supposed to fill holiday deposit slips on and leaned low. "Just sign," he said, like a man showing a tourist the correct place to stand for a photograph. 2 officers stepped in from the vestibule. Their uniforms fit like decisions. A third came from the back where the safe is and the coffee no one likes. Nathan Moore, the taller one, said. Nathan turned with half a smile, the one he uses when shaking a hand to own it. "Is there a problem?" "Hands where I can see them," the officer said, and his voice gave the room a spine. "You're under arrest for domestic assault, attempted financial exploitation, and related offenses." He recited the rest like a line learned the right way every time. Nathan laughed, then realized the sound didn't persuade the air. "This is ridiculous," he said, but he set his hands out. Metal touched his wrists, his jaw set. He looked at me over his shoulder. "Fix this," he said, as if the word were a tool I kept in a drawer labeled Mother. I didn't answer. The form on the table stared up with blank lines and dangerous blanks. The pen lay to the right of it, pointing at a future that no longer belonged to him. They walked him through the lobby, the suits and sundresses and teller's ties, and the door sighed him out into daylight. I stood until the carpet returned to being a carpet. Carla stepped in from the sidewalk, a badge clipped to her belt, her breath even. "You did fine," she said quietly. "We'll have a first appearance this afternoon. If you want to be there, I'll have a seat for you." I wanted to be there. The courtroom wore its usual clothes flags, seal the varnished pews that make you sit straighter than you meant to. June sat on my right with a notebook on her lap for a hand to hold that wasn't mine. Sloane slid into the second row on the other side, sunglasses pushed up in her hair mascara, already knowing too much. Nathan stood at the defense table with a lawyer I hadn't seen before. He looked smaller without a hallway to fill. The judge read the charges like a grocery list no one wanted, but everyone had to hear. Carla cued the audio from June's recorder. Nathan's voice filled the room flat, close the part meat tenderizers are made of. Guardianship Evelyn, one form. A judge signs and you don't sign anything again. A murmur broke and stilled. Sloane's breath caught in a way I recognized. The judge watched the screen as if it were one more person in the room who had to be measured. Given the evidence, he said, and the risk to the complaining witness, bail is denied. He didn't raise his voice so everybody listened. Nathan pivoted toward me, the chain between his hands not long enough for the gesture he wanted. "This is a setup," he said. "You're lost, Mom. You're sick." He said sick the way people say sinner, a word for putting you in a box. An officer's hand quieted his arm. That night, I took June's guest room and let the borrowed quiet stack up like quilts. The house next door mine held its breath in my peripheral vision. I woke once to a freight horn and lay there with the sound moving through me like a train does when it owns the line. 4 days passed in measured motions, statements, phone calls, June's casseroles that feed people and make the kitchen smell like a decision. On the 5th, a letter arrived addressed in Nathan's hand. The envelope had the jail's return address stamped in blue. My name looked like a dare. June set it on the table and went to the sink to rinse a glass she had already rinsed. I opened the flap with the care people reserve for things that can cut. The paper inside was thin enough to make its own noise. "Mom," he kept the M small to sound kind and didn't make it there. "I hope you're proud." Before you dig yourself deeper, think about Glenbrook Therapeutics. 14 years ago, remember those memos you reformatted? I have copies of the drafts with your handwriting on the dates. Also the cash cards from that Christmas you never declared those. I'd hate to see newspapers do what they do best. Drop the charges and we can keep the family out of the news. My stomach recognized a gravity different from fear. The name Glenbrook knocked loose a file from a shelf in me I'd meant to forget. Back then I worked late for a supervisor who liked things aligned. I changed headers, adjusted footers, moved dates to the correct box when scanned pages misbehaved. I never touched substance. At least that is the story I hold, and I hold it tightly. But the letter carried photocopies my loops on a sticky note, an arrow to a margin date, a line through a duplicate page. It also carried a photo of a holiday envelope with a gift card in it, and my first name inked in someone else's hand. I put my hand on the table and it left no mark because the table is stronger than that. June read the letter once and then again, like people do when they don't trust their eyes. "Bring it to Carla," she said, no question mark. Carla read too, eyebrows settling into a line that meant she'd seen this kind of letter before. She laid the paper flat with her fingers, keeping it from curling in the air conditioning. "This is blackmail using a mix of truth and theater," she said. "Your tasks appear clerical. We'll confirm with the file log from the clerk's office. The gift cards are a policy violation if declared. If undeclared, we can disclose. The point is, he's trying to leverage your silence." I looked at the photocopy of my own handwriting as if it could answer something. "I don't want to be a person who hides." Carla nodded. "Then we take away the hiding place. We disclose what's ours to disclose. We separate your small errors from his crimes. You tell the story in your voice, not in his." She met my eyes. Her pupils were steady. "I can schedule a press availability at Town Hall this afternoon. If you don't want that, we prepare a written statement. Either way, you speak. That's the law I can offer you today." I sat with the choice as if it were a hot cup too full to lift. June set her hand over mine and did not move it away. "I'll speak," I said. "The press room at Town Hall is smaller than it looks on television. Microphones crowd together in a bouquet of logos. A line of cameras blinks red like small focused animals. Carla stood to my left, June in the front row with her chin set. The podium carried the seal of a city that has withstood water and war and tourists. I placed my notes on the wood and didn't use them at first. "My name is Evelyn Moore," I said into the room, the sentence steady enough to stand. "I live on River Street's inland side in a woodhouse with blue shutters my mother painted." The details steadied me. For 3 years I've been subjected to control and threats inside that house by my adult son, Nathan Moore. I reported those threats and provided audio recorded by a neighbor. He is in custody. I let the air rearrange. I also need to say something about old paperwork with my initials on it. 14 years ago, at a federal clerk's office, I followed directions to correct formatting on scanned filings in a civil matter called Glenbrook Therapeutics. I adjusted headers, standardized dates, and removed duplicate pages as instructed. I accepted small holiday gift cards that I did not report. That was wrong. I am disclosing that now. Pens moved. Camera light warmed my face. My son has used those facts to try to silence me. I'm saying them here so that no one else gets to own them. I didn't aim for noble, I aimed for accurate. I read the last line I had written in my kitchen, the one I had copied twice to make the ink sit dark. "If anyone has questions for law enforcement, direct them to the district attorney's office. Thank you." I stepped back, palms open at my sides, and watched the microphones lower a fraction as if they understood the room had heard enough for 1 minute. The microphones lowered a fraction and the room released me. Carla guided me past the cluster of cameras to the corridor where paint collects fingerprints and the air loses its heat. She checked her phone, then looked up with the kind of yes that doesn't need decoration. "We've reviewed the Glenbrook material," she said. "Clerical, not criminal, no charges for you." She let the sentence sit long enough to be believed. "We'll handle media inquiries. Go home with June." Home for one more night was June's sofa made up like a proper bed, the Afghan folded along the back as if it had rehearsed. The house next door glowed with its porch light again. June switched it on before dusk, a small act that made the block look right. I slept in a clean, dreamless way that felt borrowed and welcome. The days after the press conference unrolled in neat strips, a call from Peter at Seafront saying the affidavit had been logged and forwarded, a message from the clerk's office acknowledging receipt of my written disclosure, Carla's investigator stopping by to photograph the notary stamp on the old deed and the spidery pen strokes that had put Nathan's name where it didn't belong. Sloan texted an apology without the word sorry in it and then asked if she could come by the DA's office to speak. She went the next morning in a blazer the color of restraint. When she emerged, her hands shook the way hands do when the body has finally told the truth and now must live with it. The first day of trial came airless and bright. I took my old seat on the right side of the gallery and folded my hands in my lap. The courtroom looked the way it always looks. American flag state seal wood, polished by use, but everything inside had shifted a half inch. June sat at my elbow with her notebook. She didn't write. Dana slid into the row behind me and didn't announce herself. Her knuckles rested on the rail like a white border. Peter went first. He wore a tie that apologized for being a tie. He explained how money wants to be seen as ordinary and how thieves dress it accordingly. He pointed to the printouts, the dates, the withdrawals. He said my name only when necessary and never with a question mark at the end of it. June testified next, hands steady on the Bible voice, steady on the stand. She explained the camera with the patience of a woman who has taught children to tie laces and men to take their pills. The recording played again guardianship, the threat of a facility, the promise that I would thank him later. The sound filled the room but didn't own it. Sloan took the stand in a blazer that made her look like the honest version of every photo op she'd ever organized. She spoke about nights the thermostat dropped to a number that made the house mean about a bruise she covered with careful makeup on a morning. She couldn't forget about a sentence Nathan had practiced on her that fit in the room like a bad piece of furniture. "You don't remember that, right? Let me handle it." When she stepped down, she didn't look at him. The defense tried a delicate story, misunderstandings, a son bearing responsibility for a mother's disordered papers, a domestic quarrel misheard through a window. The jurors listened with faces that did not volunteer their plans. I testified too. I stood where I have watched strangers stand for 40 years and said my name again as if speaking it aloud finished a task. I told them about envelopes with 20s inside and notes about receipts, about the UPS counter and the pen that found the line for me, about the way footsteps can teach a house to brace. I did not look at Nathan when I said any of it. A bailiff coughed once, the judge drank from a foam cup, the clock ticked but quieter. The verdict came at 3:19 on a Thursday that smelled like rain and hot tires. People say juries don't look at the accused when the answer is guilty. This jury did not look at him or at me. The foreman's voice stayed in the middle register: embezzlement, domestic assault, intimidation of a witness. The words landed like furniture moved back where it had always belonged. The sentence followed later, a handful of years long enough to be counted in holidays. Civil things moved too. A probate judge in a smaller room voided the deed change, on grounds that sounded as old as ink and due influence incapacity, not shown by me but manufactured around me. At the clerk's counter, the woman with the stamp pressed the seal into paper with a satisfaction I felt through the counter. "You're back where you started," she said, sliding the copy across, "which is not nothing." Is not. When I opened my front door with my own key and no terms attached, the house exhaled. I put the thermostat where the air remembered people and not performance. I turned the salt shaker outward on the table so the label faced me again. My mother's photograph seemed less stern, or maybe I had adjusted. Carla introduced me to a nonprofit that answers phones when seniors call about accounts that don't add up, and visitors who call themselves helpers. They sat me at a desk by a window where the light matched the light in my kitchen. I learned to say my name and the organization's name in the same breath. I learned to listen for the small pauses where a story hides the part that matters. The stipend made the end of the month land softer. The work made the mornings stand up straighter. One evening the jail called. The recorded voice did its preamble and then handed the line to my son. His voice was smaller on a monitored system. "Mom," he said, "are you going to forgive me?" I could feel the river's evening wind in the hallway pushing the curtain in and out like breath. "That isn't a decision I make on the phone," I said. It came out level. Silence gathered at the edges. "I'm safe," I added to mark something in the air that hadn't been marked before. He didn't argue. The line went back to the recording and then to the dial tone, which is the truest sound a phone makes. I made grits the next morning and ate them warm by the window with the paper folded to the section I like. I let the salt sit where it pleased. The oaks along the street threw their patient shade, and a freight horn reached the house like a low note from a familiar hymn. I washed the bowl, set it in the rack, and left the window open so the lemon oil and old pine could meet the river air halfway. The latch settled. The house breathed. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story. I'll see you next time as we continue exploring more journeys and lessons together.